Welcome to the Good Mood Show. I'm your host, Matt O'Neill. Be sure to hit subscribe so that you get a good mood every single week. Today, we are talking about Sadhguru and specifically his program, Inner Engineering. I just got back from a week-long trip in Los Angeles, California, where Sadhguru gave his Inner Engineering program in person. If you have not heard of Sadhguru yet, you are going to start to see him everywhere. He is one of the biggest spiritual teachers on the planet. In fact, the way that I got connected with him is I did a Google search for the most influential spiritual teachers that exist, and a list that Watkins magazine produces had the top 100 spiritual teachers. Number one was the Dalai Lama. Number two was the Pope. Number three was Eckhart Tolle. And then number four was Sadhguru. And I said, man, if he's with this list, I need to know who this guy is. So I did a little bit of research, and then I saw that he was offering this program in LA. I bought some of his books and then signed up for the program. And what you're about to learn today on this episode is how to live your life with an open heart and create peace and joy wherever you go. And I'm so excited to share this information with you. And really, I'm very excited about what it's going to do for you in your life as what it's doing for me in my life. He describes his Inner Engineering program as a program that brings about a shift in the way you perceive and experience your life, your work, and the world you live in. The objective of the program is to explore your highest potential, and it leads to a life of fulfillment and joy. So if you're good for that, you definitely want to listen to this episode. And I've got a free resource for you. I will send you a copy of all of my handwritten notes. I have about 20 pages of handwritten notes from the 7-day workshop. If you're already a subscriber to the Good Mood Show newsletter, you'll get a copy of those notes this week. If not, no worries. Just go to goodmoodshow.com and sign up for that newsletter, and you'll be able to instantly download them or reach out on our contact page, and I'll email them to you. So the very first thought that we start with today is that the cosmos is going perfect. The entire enormous universe, which scientists say is unlimited, that there's no edge to it, that it goes on forever. This entire unlimited cosmos is going perfectly. And yet, a tiny thought in our head is driving us crazy today. So when you start to think about how big the cosmos really are, it brings perspective into gratitude for this moment. And I'm just going to take you down an exercise about how big the universe really is. We're incapable of understanding its size. But I go to the beach. I love to surf. And so imagine you go to the beach and you reach down and you grab a handful of sand. And as you look in that handful of sand and you look at how many grains of sand there are, I mean, just imagine trying to count up just the tiny, minuscule grains of sand in your hand from that one handful of sand. Now imagine a bucket of sand. How many grains of sand would be in there? Now imagine all the sand up and down the coast of that beach. How many grains of sand would be on that beach? Now imagine every beach on the entire planet. How many grains of sand exist on every beach on the entire planet? That is how many stars exist in our universe. There are as many stars in the universe as there are tiny grains of sand on the entire planet. There are over 1 billion galaxies. I'm not talking about solar systems, not like the solar system we live in, like the Milky Way galaxy. There are 1 billion Milky Way galaxies. And so if you think about the Milky Way as one of 1 billion galaxies, and within the Milky Way, we're this tiny speck of a solar system. And within the tiny speck of the solar system, and the solar system is huge. It takes light years to get from one end of our solar system, from Pluto to the sun and back. Our solar system is this tiny speck. No, it doesn't take light years, but it takes years and years and years. Like it's like to get to Mars at the closest point is going to take years for a spaceship to get there. But of that tiny speck of a solar system compared to the universe, think about now you on Earth. You are this tiny speck on this tiny speck of a planet, on a tiny speck of a solar system that's 1 in a billion galaxies. And so when we make our problems really big, it becomes a little bit laughable, because if you really sit and think about it, the enormous and vastness of all the cosmos, all of the forces are aligning to allow you to be here today. And when you keep that in mind, when you keep the fact that we are floating through empty space on a ball of dirt, and that it's all happening and you get to experience it, when you get into that vastness of a thought pattern, you start to see that this problem really is not a problem. I get to be here in the first place. The next concept is to be intensely involved in life. And so the more involved we are with what's going on in life consciously, the happier we get to be. So, half the world tuned in to the World Cup, the last World Cup. There were 3.5 billion people that watched the last World Cup. Half the world watched 22 men play soccer. So, and like super intense, the whole world is like screaming at their televisions and throwing things. And, it's not the game. We weren't watching 22 men play a game. It wasn't about the ball. It was the fact that these 22 men were so intensely involved in what they were doing. We were so invested in how invested they were in this outcome. That's why half the world tuned in. So desire is not a problem. It's just that when your desires happen compulsively instead of intentionally, that's when it becomes a problem. When we make our desires fully conscious and we are fully in control of what we consciously want, and we get intensely involved in what we want, life can be really beautiful. And so how do we do this? Well, the first thing is we have to create a space between our compulsive desires and who we really are, understanding that much of what we're doing right now is just driven by compulsion. We eat by an urge of compulsion. Our habits are done compulsively. A lot of our thoughts are just repeated compulsive thoughts. So as soon as the more conscious we become, the less and the less and the less suffering we create. We only create suffering and misery when we are being compulsive. But if we take this journey from unconscious compulsiveness to conscious involvement, we're taking a journey to make our life heaven. And when we're unconscious to things, we are enslaved by them. All of this suffering is just mental. It's really, really rare that we're in physical pain. Suffering is just suffering from our own thoughts. But who creates our thoughts? That's what I was talking about. We're on this tiny speck of a planet upset about this problem. But who's upset about the problem? Why? Who created the thought that says we should be upset about that problem? Well, I did. You create your thoughts that suffer. And it's because your thoughts that are suffering thoughts are not chosen by you. They're compulsive thoughts. They're unconscious. If you were conscious to what this thought was doing to you, you would stop creating it. So the more conscious we can become about our thoughts, the less we can suffer from them. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a little bit. To start, first, we're going to get into responsibility. And one of the most compulsively negative thought patterns we can get into is a thought pattern of victimhood. This is happening to me. This is outside of my control. I don't like this and I'm not in control of it. Well, victims always suffer. And every time I take a stance of victimhood, like somebody harmed me, somebody did this to me, the economy is hurting me. Every time I go victim, I suffer. And so you're the same way. Every single time you are a victim to something, you are suffering. Well, being a victim to something is a choice of how you perceive it. And as soon as you make a different choice, that you choose to be responsible for absolutely everything in your life, you can drop the suffering. So when you're responsible, you always get to say, well, I'm responsible for this, so what can I do about it? And from that place, we move out of victimhood and into action. And from action, we can make our situation better. Action is about the situation. And when you remove the emotions, it's really easy to figure out what to do. This actually came from David Hawkins. I was watching videos by David Hawkins a few months ago, and I just loved, if you've been following the podcast, I was in a pretty tough situation at work, and, I felt like a victim. Interest rates went way up, and the government did that, and I didn't do it. And, and here I was, and I had to respond to it. Of course, I was being responsible and taking appropriate action, but I was saying, hey, this isn't on me. Like this, I didn't raise interest rates. But anyway, I was watching this video by David Hawkins, and he said, if you took your emotions out of the situation, what to do next is really easy. And he said, this is everything. So let's say your spouse wants a divorce and you don't want one. Oh man, there'd be a ton of emotions there. If Katie said, Matt, I want a divorce, that would really hurt. And there would be a huge amount of emotional pain that would happen there. But in this video, David said, if you could just take your emotions out of it, what to do next is really easy to figure out. Well, great. Okay, so now we take care of that. We decide everything that needs to happen. And then I go and, live my life in the most joyful possible way I can and find people for my life that want me in it. Like that's what to do next. In the absence of emotion, you could totally move joyfully in the next phase of your life. He used another example. You lose your job. Well, let's say you get fired and you think it's wrongful termination. And so then there's all this like disgrace, you got fired, or revenge seeking at the job, the boss that fired you. Well, if you took the emotions, if you took all that stuff out of it, what would you do next? Oh, you get a new job. I mean, everybody needs people to work for them. Like right now, you could just go work somewhere else, and you could choose to do it to the best of your ability and be joyful about it. So this was really powerful for me. As we were losing money in my company, I watched that video and I said, okay, well, I've got a lot of emotion here as we're losing money, fear that we'll lose our house, or upset about what's going on, and confusion that I don't know what to do next. I said, let's just take the emotion out of it. So we're losing more money than we're making. If I take the emotion out of it, what's really clear that I need to do next? I said, oh, well, I need to spend less. And so as soon as I got super clear that we just needed to spend less, I started to spend a lot less. And then a couple months later, we started making money again. And it was not because we were making more sales, because the economy is the economy. It was because we were spending less than we were bringing in. And then that is called profit. And so that was really helpful for me. So as you go into an emotionally charged situation and you don't know what to do next, remember this. If you just took all the emotions out of what you're going through, the action to take next is really easy to figure out. There's always a very clear action to take that will make your situation better. And it's the sooner you just get straight to the action and making your life better, the happier you get to be, and you get to let go of all of the victimhood stuff. So this concept of responsibility is two words. If you break it up, it's response ability. So it's really your ability to respond. So if you take responsibility for absolutely everything in your life, you can always choose to respond. No matter what happens, no matter if you think it's unfair or it shouldn't have happened or whatever, you just say, whatever happens, I am going to choose to respond. And this means that responsibility actually requires your willingness to respond. You can respond to anything in your life so long as you are willing to respond. But when your responsibility is limited, that means your action is limited. So Here's a couple questions for you. Are you responsible for your home being peaceful? Well, the answer is yes. You are able to respond and make your home as peaceful as you can. Are you responsible for your workplace being peaceful? This one can be a little bit more triggering, like, oh, I didn't hire that person that's not peaceful. But if you understand you have the ability to respond, then yes, you can take 100% responsibility for making your workplace peaceful. Even though you can't control other people, you can have the ability to respond to make your workplace peaceful. Then we go to the street. Are you responsible for the street you're walking on being peaceful? Again, we can't control other people. Let's say a fight breaks out on that street and you say, "Oh, that's not my responsibility." Well, as soon as you limit your ability to respond to the world, you limit your action and you limit your life. So when you take 100% responsibility for everywhere you go being peaceful, that means that you're willing to respond to every single situation and make it as peaceful as possible. And when you do this, you are now owning your life. And this creates a lot of happiness. You come to see that you have an unlimited ability to respond. It doesn't mean that your skill set is unlimited. So you may not have the skill set to go break up a fight, but if you are willing to respond in every situation that you get encountered to, then you're fully participating in life and you're willing to do the best that you can. This is a life fully lived. So if you want to be a full-time human being, you must assume an unlimited amount of responsibility wherever you go. And as soon as you choose to limit your responsibility, you start to put up walls around yourself. You start to decide what you will and what you won't be involved in. And then this is how you limit your joy, because you're now just a part-time human being. And if you look at our physiology, your body already responds to the entire universe around you. When the sun comes up in the morning, every cell in your body responds to the sun that came up. And you didn't choose to. Your body just physically changes when the environment around you changes. The force of nature that's in you is already responding to everything. It's only your mind that is choosing to limit your response ability. So, when you think about what's the force in nature that's responsible for absolutely everything that is, well, that's what we call God. God is the force that is responsible for absolutely everything. And as you start to see that you are also responsible for everything, or your ability to respond, if you're willing, can be responsible for everything, you tap into the aspect of God that is within you. And when you do this, you are fully alive, and this creates a lot of joy. Moving to the experience of love. So we just talked about peace, and we've talked a little bit about joy. And in the three highest states that there are peace, joy, and love. And this idea of love is not something that happens to you. Love is not something that someone else gives to you. Love isn't something you give to someone else. Love is only happening within you. The love is not even about you. It's not about the other person. We just use other people as a key to unlock the lock that we've put on our own heart. And we've all locked down our heart to say, hey, I'm not going to love that person because a while ago I was hurt by somebody like that. Or I'm not going to love in this situation. I'm going to stay out of that situation because I've been hurt there before. Well, when we start to do that, we start to limit who we're willing to open our heart to. We start to limit who we can feel the emotion of love around. And then we limit our own love. But who's in control of the lock? Who's in control of opening your heart? You are the one that's in control of the lock. You are in control of feeling love as much as you want. We just use the world as the key. What happens in the world is the key that unlocks our heart. But what if we just said, the hell with the lock, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm just going to open my heart and love every aspect of the entire world. Well, when you put no restrictions on who you're willing to love, you can have an absolute love affair with life. And that would be one of the most joyful, blissful experiences that we could experience. And there is a way that you can do this, and I'm going to take you through it. So I want you to imagine that you have a child, a beautiful baby child. Let's say this is just this sweet, precious little baby girl. And, I happen to love, I've got 4 kids. And so children just light me up. But imagine your own child is smiling at you. Can you love this child? Of course. I mean, this is your child. You would do anything for this kid. Well, what if they made a mistake? Would you still love them? I remember Cameron took a pen, I think it was a Sharpie, and she drew all over the wall, all over. And this is a house we were renting. She took a Sharpie black marker and drew all over the wall, circles and circles and circles. And I remember it happened, and I still loved the heck out of her, and she was only 3 years old, or maybe 4. She knew not to do that, but it's not like I didn't love her as she had drawn Sharpie all over the wall. I just needed to grab some cleaning supplies and have her help me clean it. And fortunately, the magic eraser got it right off. Well, let's think about if this child said something really rude to you. And this happens, now my oldest is 9. Sometimes some rude things get said. Would you still love your child if they said something rude to you? Well, of course you would. I mean, who doesn't say rude things sometimes? But what if your child hurt you? Would you still love them then? And the answer is always yes. You would always love your child no matter what. Well, now imagine that you've got 2 kids. Could you love your second child just as much as your first? I can tell you from experience that I didn't know if I would be able to, because I loved Harper so much. But as soon as Cameron was here, our second, I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I love her just as much. And now I have 4 children. Could you love 4 children? Could you love each of the 4 children with all your heart? And again, from experience, I can tell you the answer is yes. I love all 4 children. Then came Kelly, and then came Brady. I love each of them so much, my heart just explodes for these kids. And it's just one of the most beautiful feelings. But it's because there's no lock on my heart when they're around. Well, now let's expand it. Imagine you had 10 children. Could you, picture yourself with 10 children, all 10 are yours. Can you feel that your heart would be fully open to each of these 10 kids? What about 100 children? And I know that this isn't physically possible, but imagine you had 100 children. Close your eyes and picture these 100 beautiful little faces that you know deeply and you love deeply. Can you see that you could love each of the children, all 100 of them? What about 1,000 children? What about 10,000 children? Could you love each child of 10,000 kids? Just if they were your children, could you just love them? What about 100,000 children? 1,000,000 children? What about 7 billion children? You start to see that you can love every single being on this planet if you're willing. As soon as you unlock your heart, doesn't matter if someone is rude to you or someone makes a mistake, or even if somebody tries to hurt you, your ability to love is within your control. You hold the key that unlocks your heart. It's not them. And this brings us to happiness. And this is the Good Mood Show, and feeling peaceful and feeling love and feeling happy. This is the whole point of the show. As you think about things that make you happy, so just think of a moment in time that made you happy? Think of a couple of experiences. What are a couple of experiences? Just take a moment, search your mind for the last week or month or year. What are a couple moments that just really made you happy? I'm thinking of a time I went surfing with my daughters. We were at the beach. This was just a couple of weeks ago. My whole family went to the beach, and I took all of my daughters out in the ocean, and they were surfing with me. And then I came up on the beach, and we were playing in the sand with my son, and my kids buried me, and Katie was there, and we were all just having just this beautiful family day. And that experience made me very happy. Think about your experience that made you happy. What is it about these experiences that makes you happy? When you look deeply at them, you come to see that you are happy when the experience goes the way you want the experience to go. Right now, if what is happening is what you want to happen, you're happy. But if what is happening you don't want to happen, you're not happy. So let's examine this, because again, we're talking about unlocking your heart here and unlocking your happiness. Who decides if the experience is something they want or don't want? You do. So your likes and your dislikes are your bondage. They are the lock and key you put on your happiness. When you look at this exact now moment, can you change this moment? This exact moment, wherever you are in this moment, listening to this podcast episode, could you change this moment in time? Not the next moment, but this moment. No, you cannot change this moment. As soon as you touch this moment, it's unchangeable. You can't change this moment. It's actually inevitable. This moment, this exact moment in time, this now moment is inevitable. So if you cannot change it, then resisting it and suffering and saying, I don't want it, is silly. Happiness doesn't come because you get what you want. Happiness comes because you accept this moment as inevitable and you fully accept it as exactly what you want. Unhappiness is not accepting this moment, but you can't change it. You could change the next future moments, but you can't change this moment. So not accepting this moment is foolish. Once you fully accept what is here right now, each and every inevitable moment, your happiness becomes constant. And sometimes some tough things happen. And, not by our own hand. Sometimes just things happen. And, in those moments when it's God's will, something happens. That's a good time to ask yourself, who's smarter? Am I smarter or is God smarter? And we know, well, since God holds 1 billion galaxies in place, he's smarter. Well, when things happen that are God's will, we should also choose to be happy with that because he knows better. So whatever you accept, you're free of. And whatever you don't accept is your suffering. That's your bondage. I'm gonna move into some things that maybe are holding us back from fully feeling happy in this moment that are unconscious. And this is thought patterns from our ancestors. There's a unconscious level of being within us. And Sadhguru had talked about this experiment done on rats. And they would spray a very specific smell. It was a cherry blossom smell on these rats. And as they sprayed the cherry blossom smell, they electrocuted the rats' feet. And so that was very painful for the rats. And they did this over and over and over again to this one generation of rats. And they would spray the smell and then electrocute their feet. And it didn't kill the rats, it just hurt them. And so their heart rates would go up and they would freak out. It was very cruel, right? Well, the children of those rats never had gotten electrocuted, but when they sprayed the cherry blossom smell to the children of those rats, those children's heart rates elevated. They freaked out and they started going crazy like they were going to get electrocuted, but they didn't get electrocuted. The children of those rats, they sprayed that smell. They freaked out. So this is the grandchildren of those original rats. They freaked out when the cherry blossom smell came around, thinking they were going to get electrocuted. This went on for 7 generations of rats. So the 7th generation from that first initial rats that had been electrocuted with the smell of cherry blossoms freaked out when they smelled cherry blossom smell. This talks about how we inherit tendencies unconsciously from our ancestors. This is also your responsibility. So whatever happened to your ancestors that created suffering in them, that may have been super intense for them, that they freaked out about, you inherited it. Back 7 generations, you inherited it. You know, so all their pain, all the stuff that messed with them, now you get. And you know, we can be upset about that, or we can take responsibility for it. And this goes back to choosing to take 100% responsibility. We have an ability to do something about the unconscious thought patterns that create our suffering. And just because we inherited these worries, these fears, this anger, you know I inherited a lot of anger. That was just like, it just came like, and so but I had the ability to say, when I was a kid, I used to just blow up, you know, I would yell at people. Even in my young 20s, I would just blow up. And I thought it was just the way I was. Oh yeah, I'm just this way. But that was being a victim to my inheritance of anger. And once I started to take responsibility for it, I started to study and say, well, what can I do about this anger? And well, that's where meditation started to come in. And that's where some, you know, reading came in, and studying peaceful people, and then doing peaceful practices, and then making peace a choice. Whatever holds you back, maybe you get anxiety. Well, it might not even be yours. It might be your great grandmother's anxiety, because she, you know, went through the potato famine in Ireland like my grandparents did. And they're always, you know, and you just can have this fear and you don't know why, just things make you anxious. Well, as soon as you take responsibility and say, I have the ability to do something about this, and I'm responsible, you can start to do something about it. And I can tell you from experience, when I started to make progress on my emotions, I was able to do something about them. That's what this whole podcast, The Good Mood Show, is all about, is taking responsibility for our moods and our emotions, because we are able to make more pleasant emotions. You know, tonight when you go to sleep, and tomorrow if you wake up, don't take it for granted. 250,000 people will not wake up tomorrow. So one way to choose good moods is tomorrow, if you wake up, smile. You know, there will be 5 million people tomorrow morning that will mourn the death of someone who didn't wake up in their household. You know, so a close loved one. 5 million people tomorrow will be mourning the death of a loved one from that night. So if you wake up and everyone in your house wakes up, that is a reason to celebrate. You know, and you know, another time to smile and really celebrate and be grateful is every time you take a look at your watch. Every time you take a look at your phone and you check the time, smile. You're alive. You're alive at this moment. You got to check the time. Because there is going to be a time when you won't be able to check the time. They'll come and check the time for you, and they'll say, this person is pronounced dead at this time. So if you're alive and you can check the time, every time you look at your phone and you check the time, or you look at your watch, you check your time, you smile. Being blissful and being loving, this is a choice. It allows you to do things that are wonderful when you're choosing to be blissful and loving. So how you do this, you wake up, you smile, and you say to yourself, today I choose to create a loving world. Today I choose to create a peaceful world. Today I choose to create a joyful world. Just creating this thought in your head to start each day will set the intention that that's how your day will go. Who you are is whatever you're willing to do. If you are loving, you're willing to give love and compassion to other people. If you are joyful, you're willing to bring joy to other people's days. If you are peaceful, you're willing to create peace wherever you go. And here's the best part. Being loving, being joyful, and being peaceful is pleasant for you. It is only sensible to make your life beautiful. When you approach the world in a loving way, regardless of what's happening in it, the world responds back to you in a loving way. Thank you for listening this week to the Good Mood Show. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed delivering this message, and go out there and choose to be loving.